This election came down to domestic issues, none more important than cost of living. And that trend is global. Inflation has humbled a number of incumbents this year, whether it's in the Western world or in Africa or in Asia. It's been the ultimate deciding factor. Let's look at some of the elections we had in 2024, and we had a lot of them. More than 60 countries held elections this year. Around 50% of the world population voted. Now look at the results. In Britain, the ruling Conservative Party was ousted. The Labour is now in power. Around 45% voters said inflation was the biggest issue for them. In South Korea, we had parliamentary elections this year. President Yoon's party was wiped out. The Liberal opposition won a landslide. One of the biggest election issues was the price of green onions. In South Africa, the unthinkable happened. The ruling African National Congress lost its majority after 30 years, basically for the first time after apartheid. In France, same story. The right-wing parties won the European Parliament elections. The left-wing led the national elections. And who lost out both the times? President Macron's centrists. In Iran, we had presidential elections. Their hardline president was killed in a chopper crash. And who did the people replace him with? A reformist. And finally, you have Japan. The ruling party decided to call snap elections last month. They ended up losing more than 60 seats. Again, rice prices were a key issue. Of course, all these elections had a regional context too. But cost of living was common and a key issue. It cut across ideological lines. This factor did not spare left-wing leaders or right-wing leaders. It impacted all of them. Also, this trend is not limited to 2024. Argentina elected President Javier Milei in late 2023. The Maldives elected Mohamed Muizzu around the same time. Again, the issue was inflation. You can trace it back to the Wuhan virus pandemic. Most global supply chains were affected. Government spending skyrocketed. Welfare schemes were ramped up. All of this led to rising prices across the world. In 2022, global inflation was around 8% average. In 2019, it was just 2%, and the incumbents have been paying the price for this. In 2022, ruling parties and presidents were ousted in Brazil and Italy. Again, two major economies. The question is, how long will this impact last? Logic says until inflation reduces, but prices are often sticky. It takes time for changes to reflect on the ground. Consider the United States. In September, their inflation was just 2.4%. In mid-2022, it was more than 9%. And before the pandemic, just a shade above 2%. So we've come back to the same place. Prices have come down from the peaks of 2022. Even the labour market and GDP numbers are better than Europe. Yet, the incumbents lost. That too to a candidate who was voted out for mishandling a crisis. It tells you a couple of things. One, GDP growth and inflation graphs look good on TV channels, but people care about real-life impact, about the numbers at petrol pumps and at the grocery store. They want to see if headline gains trickle down to them or not. And number two, voters will compromise on ideology, but not on livelihood. That's why the Democrats lost nearly 13 million voters from 2020. That's why Hispanics voted for Trump despite his rhetoric. It's a message to politicians around the world. Virtue signaling won't bring you the votes, nor will hate mongering. Voters care about concrete results that impact them directly. The question is this trend here to stay, or is it a temporary fallout of the pandemic? As they say, only time will tell.